it was a high wire act, but that was part of it because I wanted to risk a lot because that's what the pros do. Think about the stakes for the real pros. It's your livelihood. You don't perform, like you don't keep your shoe contract. It's as simple as that.
This is Running for Real, the podcast for runners who know that for every runner's high, there are just as many lows. All those just missed PRs, easy runs that feel hard, injury blues, and more. Each week, we'll talk to running, health, and wellness experts about their highs, lows, and best advice to build our confidence. Running for Real is about being honest, being brave, and most of all, not feeling alone. And now here's our host, Tina Muir.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 194 of the Running for Real podcast. Thank you so much for being here today. Even though I am not the one recording the episode, yes, this is another one of the episodes that Sarah Crouch is recording, and she did such a good job. I was so impressed with her interviewing skills. People are usually pretty nervous when they're interviewing for the first time, but she just crushed it. Each and every one of these episodes she recorded, she did so well, and I really enjoyed the interviews that came out of them. They were enjoyable for me to listen to and kind of cool for me to listen to an episode on my own podcast that I didn't record. So I kind of got to listen to it as a listener. And I have to say, I definitely enjoyed it, and I think you will too. But before I get to more about who my guest is today, last week we had Molly Seidel on the show. Molly is kind of known for finishing second at the US 2020 Olympic Marathon Trials, beating a lot of experienced and talented runners who took to that tough Atlanta course. But we also discussed her life beyond that race, kind of before that race. There was a lot of conversation about her recovery from her eating disorder, the pressure she faced as a teenager, coming up as this phenom, and she really was raw and vulnerable and real, and I just loved her. I'm sure you did too. Now today, as I said, Sarah Crouch will be recording the episode. She did a great job interviewing Matt Fitzgerald. I think this is Matt's third return visit to Running for Real, and Matt and Sarah, which you will soon hear, are fast friends. They really just love to have fun together, and you'll hear there's a lot of laughter in this episode. There's a great, very casual conversation because they just know each other so well at this point. And Matt is going to be sharing his experience going to Flagstaff to live at altitude for a short while he prepared for the Chicago Marathon. So if you've ever wondered what it's like to be an elite, Matt truly got to experience that by training with NAS Elite, and you will hear more about that. Now, if you want to find out more, you can go to the show notes for anything that we talk about today in the episode by going to tinamuir.com/episode 194. Now, we are just going to take a moment to thank one of our sponsors, UCAN Tracksmith. Those are the wonderful brands that are helping me with this episode today, and we're going to give one of them a quick thanks, and we'll be right to the episode.
A lot of us are working from home right now, and we find ourselves faced with plenty of uncertainty and brand new challenges, but on the bright side, most of us have plenty of time to run. And even though there may not be a ton of races on the horizon, everyday nutrition is more important than ever. And we're all looking for those daily energy sources that not only fuel our runs, but provide the kind of energy that lasts for hours. UCAN is nothing like those sodium and sugar-filled sports drinks that we grew up with. It's based on the premise of steady, long-lasting energy with no spike and no crash, which is exactly what we all want to fuel our day. I happen to know that my good friend and host of this podcast, Tina Muir, uses UCAN in her daily smoothies for a sustained energy boost. And I've been a big fan of UCAN for years, and personally, I can attest that it's a fantastic fuel source for training and racing. I've used UCAN in several marathons and have set many personal bests using it as my primary fuel and recovery source. And a few years back, I decided to race the Chicago Marathon. And after doing a lot of research, I found UCAN online and I fell in love with the story behind the development of this product. And I decided I wanted to give it a shot. So I used it during all of my workouts that build up as a source of post-workout recovery and, of course, as my primary fuel source during the race. And that year, I took 12 minutes off my personal best, dropping from 244 to 232 and finishing 6th place overall. And I've always believed that all runners should be students of the sport and give themselves every opportunity to be their best, especially in the field of nutrition. So I encourage you to do your research on this innovative company, their incredible origin story, and how they can help you become the best runner you can be. Use code TinaMuir25 to save 25% off your first order. Or if you're already a UCAN fan like me, save 15% with code TinaUCAN15. All right, welcome back to the Running for Real podcast. I am your guest host, Sarah Crouch, and today I have with me a good friend, a prolific author of just a couple dozen running books, and including my absolute favorite running book, by the way, which is How Bad Do You Want It? And the proud parent of a 2:39 marathon PR, Matt Fitzgerald. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I am so glad you're here. And Matt has a brand new book called Running the Dream coming out in May. So by the time this podcast airs, the book will already be out. And we're going to talk all about that today. But first, I want to kind of throw a chicken and egg question at you, which is basically, which came first for you, writing or running?
Writing by a little bit. I got both from my dad. My dad was running marathons when I was a kid, which made me think it was normal, even though it wasn't that normal back in the early mid-80s. And my dad is also a writer. By the time I was sort of old enough to understand these things, there were books with novels with his name on the spine sitting on shelves in our house. So that seemed like, that wasn't normal, but it seemed like it to me. And I think I was 9 when I declared that I was going to be a writer when I grew up. And I was 11 when I started running. So both, I developed a passion for both early, but the writing did come first.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the writers I know are heavily influenced by the books they read as well. And I've heard you mention that for this book in particular, Running the Dream, there was a book called Paper Lion that came out in the 60s that you kind of based the premise on. Do you want to tell us about that a little bit?
Yeah. Paper Lion was written by George Plimpton. He passed on several years ago, but he was a really good writer, just kind of like a literary guy. He edited a literary magazine and wrote a bunch of books, but he was also a sports nut. He wasn't really an athlete himself, but he was a big sports fan. And at one point, he cooked up the idea of talking a professional football team into allowing him to participate fully as a last string quarterback in a summer training camp. It took him 2 years to get a team to say yes. That ended up being the Detroit Lions. I mean, this could never happen now. I think it was 1962 when this happened. But it's a great read because he's a terrific writer and he's just completely out of his depth. And so it's, there's a lot of self-deprecating humor, but it also gives you a different window in what it was like to be a professional football player. I mean, a pro football player can retire and write a book about their own experience, but it's never going to be as relatable than if an everyman or every woman just mixes it up with the pros and tells their story. So, I thought, Plimpton ended up doing it with a bunch of sports, actually, tennis, hockey, baseball. Paper Lion is just his most famous, but I thought, hey, why not running?
Okay, so it took him 2 years to find a team. How long did it take you to find a running team that would let you jump on board with them?
It took me one email.
This should go to show that running and football are not even remotely in the same arena, pun intended. That is ridiculous. And why Northern Arizona Elite? Well, before we get into that, why don't you share just kind of the basic premise of Running the Dream?
Yeah, I mean, it's Paper Lion in running. I mean, I do happen to be a runner. I am a lifelong runner. So it was, Plimpton, I don't think ever really played football. So I have a lot of experience, a lot of passion, and above average talent, though I was never, even in my youth, close to elite. But yeah, that's what I wanted to do is hook up with, a top-notch professional running team and just go through the whole experience. Football's a fan sport. Running is more participatory. So I did want to offer that same kind of, locker room view of what it's like to be a professional runner. But at the same time, I thought that I could go through an experience like this and actually see if, what does this lifestyle, this full commitment to pursuing the best you can be, what does it do for someone who isn't born with the genes? And, I was 46 years old at the time, so I wasn't young either. And I thought, if this doesn't end in disaster, it could be both inspiring and also edifying, for other runners. They could actually, hopefully it would be an interesting story, that kind of voyeuristic thrill, but also readers could take away something that they could actually use, both inspiration and information, to pursue their own dreams.
Why did you choose Northern Arizona Elite? There are a couple of professional running groups in the country. Why this one in particular, and why Flagstaff?
Yeah, so 2 reasons. One, I knew the coach, Ben Rosario, just a little bit. Actually, we had never met in person, but I knew he just liked my writing, and I actually liked his writing as well. He wrote a really excellent book for high school running coaches that I had raved about, I think, on social media, and that tickled him. So there was a little bit of goodwill in place there. But also, Ben's team, Northern Arizona Elite, has a reputation for being very open and transparent, and they share everything with the broader running community because they understand that running really isn't kind of the rabid fan sport that a lot of other sports are. So they're trying to basically make the running community care, or give them reasons to care, but also to give back. So I thought, if anyone's going to say yes to this harebrained scheme, it's going to be someone like Ben Rosario. And it was almost instantaneous. Like, I threw it out there and he said, let's do it.
Yeah. How long before, because I know you came up, was it July that you finally came up to Flagstaff? How long had you had this set up?
I came up with the idea in the previous fall. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason for the timing is that I'm an injury-prone runner, always have been. And, I was getting on in years. So I went through this phase where I felt like, oh, goodness, I've set my last PR. And I actually legitimately grieved. It was a full-blown midlife crisis for me because I had been, chasing PRs for so long. And then when I realized that they were all behind me, it was rough. But then I had just bit of a renaissance, and it was really, I obviously wasn't getting any younger, but I was able to stay healthy for some time. And so I don't think I ever would have, taken a shot at this if I hadn't had that in the background. So I was riding a little bit of momentum, and that's when I made the pitch. But the whole thing had to come together pretty quickly because I didn't want to get even older before it actually happened. So, for example, when I showed up in Flagstaff, like, I had missed the window to register for the Chicago Marathon, which was I needed some big climax, obviously, like for Plimpton, I think it was playing like in a real preseason game or like an inter-team scrimmage or whatever. And for me, it was going to be running like a race that one of the real members of the team, or at least one of the real members of the team, was also running. And Ben had suggested Chicago. I'm like, okay, I'll sign up. It was too late. So like the whole thing did come together kind of ad hoc.
Yeah, for sure. I just imagine, though, I've thought about this moment where you pack up the Funmobile and you're on your way up to Flagstaff. I have definitely wondered if you had in that first few days a moment of like, what did I get myself into? Like, do I actually want to go through with that? Did you have that at all?
I had that moment on the first night. Yeah, I describe it in the book, because I show up, obviously Flagstaff is at 7,000 feet, or maybe that isn't obvious to everyone listening, but it is. Mm-hmm. And I live basically at sea level in Northern California. So when I showed up, I lived with one of the members of the team, Matt Yano, who was then a 212 marathoner, now a 211 marathoner. And he has this great opera. He has a nice big house, very spacious, and he loves to host mostly fellow elite endurance athletes who come for, stints of altitude training. So my wife and I had it was really a second master for 13 weeks, but there's a smaller bedroom that a professional triathlete was staying in at the time we showed up. And so, just to make myself sociable after we arrived, Nataki and I unloaded the car, set up a little bit. I just hung out with Matt and Jen Spieldenner, the professional triathlete. And, it was just like a little bit of breaking the ice, get to know you stuff. And we started talking about the altitude, and they ended up scaring the wits out of me with like their stories about like what can happen when you make that adjustment, especially if you try to do too much too soon. And so I left that little conversation a little bit shaken, like, Like, it was exactly that. Like, what have I gotten myself into?
Yeah, I think it's one thing to have this dream about doing it, because what runner hasn't, and you've actually pitched this book as one summer living, training, and racing with a team of world-class runners half your age. And I think that a lot of runners dream about what it would be like to run for a living or to run with a world-class team, but to actually put yourself in that situation at altitude, no longer fantasizing about it, but finding yourself in that scenario. To me, that screams one thing, and that one thing is imposter syndrome. Meaning, did you, and because even elites feel that at times at big races, at what point did you start to feel like, okay, I actually belong here? Or did you ever feel that way?
Yeah. Like, I stood out so much that, like, I couldn't even try to pass as just one of the guys. I had gray hair at my temples. I was just way slower. I've got kind of crepey skin in my lower quads. It's just like, and I wasn't like all decked out in like Hoka's finest. So like, I got it. Like, I was never going to like completely fit in. And so, I never felt, I didn't have any anxiety about like, closing the gap completely. But I was self-conscious about, like, I remember the first strength workout was just a humiliation for me, because like, I'm actually strong for a runner. It's part of the reasons I was never an elite runner. It's like, I probably got like too much upper body muscle, but like the way the pros strength train is just like not the way even serious amateurs like me do. And so I just couldn't do the stuff, and I'm just falling all over the gym. And so the first time we did, drills, same thing. I just looked like Bambi on ice skates. So there was just like, there were a lot of moments like that. And, just like, I just wouldn't have the right gear for that, that I needed for a certain thing. I kept just like making myself conspicuous, and that did go away. And also, I am a writer. And I mean, no one on the team was a Matt Fitzgerald fan, but I mean, they sort of knew who I was. And so that sort of, they knew there was a writer in their midst. Mm-hmm. And so that was a little bit of a barrier too initially. But what happens is, like, if you just keep showing up, like, folks get used to you. And that really did happen. So, by the end, even though, I was still slower and still had the crepey skin, I had really just melded with the group.
Did you find that, were they more or less welcoming than you thought they would be, the pro runners in particular? Or was that kind of case by case? Because I know we have a lot of different personalities that you dealt with in the book. So was that pretty individual?
It was pretty individual. I mean, nobody was unwelcoming. And, so I would say the extremes were, on the one hand, like Stephanie Bruce, she's a mother. She has 2 boys. And so she's just maternal. Mm-hmm. So even though, I mean, she's, I think, like 13, 14 years younger than me, at least, she sort of took me under her wing right away. Like, she was the first person in the first run I did with the team to actually drop back and sort of keep me company. I couldn't keep, even on an easy run. I could have kept up, but it wouldn't have been smart. And so, just like giving me lots of softball questions to make me So, I mean, she went out of her way, and so did, other people to varying degrees. Matt Yano, my host, he just bent over backwards for me in all kinds of ways. And then like the other extreme would be like Kellen Taylor, who just like, she's one of those people who comes with a warning. Like, I mean, she is a wonderful human being. Mm-hmm. I mean, she is, but she's one of those people who, like, she's sort of almost intentionally prickly to just like,
you kind of have to fight your way in, Yeah.
Exactly. She likes to weed out the people she's probably not going to want to deal with long term anyway. So if you can put up with the iciness, like, then you get to see the real Kellen. So, yeah. I mean, I was there for a long time before, like, she even sort of really acknowledged my existence. And, I ended up getting to know her, quite well. And she became like a more salient part of the experience I had there. So, and, I was sort of on a mission. I think there were 12 like resident members of the team at the time. And, I wanted to make some kind of connection with each and every one of them. And I did. So that was nice.
Yeah. When you talked about strength training, I couldn't help but just picture, because Kellen is also a firefighter. So the things she does in the gym are just absolutely ridiculous. I can't, she's the kind of person you don't want to stand next to because it just doesn't look good. But I think you're right about her. And with her bristles, it's something that over time you grow to admire because she is who she is and she doesn't apologize for it. And I absolutely love how you described living with Matt Yano. It seems like every time in the book that he's mentioned, he's elbow deep in some concoction in the kitchen. And we both know how like stringent his diet is. Was that surprising to you? Someone who's written about like running nutrition, just how clean someone on the team that you were living with that he ate. Was that surprising?
Yeah. Well, I think he was the one who, in fact, he told me so, was the one who was surprised because, I have a cookbook with my name on it. And to be very clear, I had a collaborator, and the collaborator came up with the recipes because I'm not a great cook. And I'm pretty sure Matt had a copy of it. And so he's expecting like a chef or something.
Yeah.
And the thing was, at home, and I do eat, a healthy diet for sure, but my wife, Nataki, does most of the cooking at home. But when we were in Matt's house, she wasn't really super comfortable cooking in his kitchen. And I was just like busy and also still a not very good cook. So I wasn't about to like become a chef just for, because we were there for 13 weeks. So we actually did like a lot of kind of convenience food. Like we would just microwave some frozen beans or whatever, like, still like healthy stuff. And, people can sneer at frozen vegetables. They're vegetables, damn it. So I remember at one point, Matt just saying, I'm kind of surprised, and it was like, there was a little hint of judgment there.
Yeah.
So, sure. His diet is immaculate, and he's great with baking, and he enjoys it, and he puts time into it, and I don't.
Yeah, he is. I got to tell you, I think you're going to be very pleased to hear this. I saw Matt just a couple of weeks ago, and I saw him eat a full slice of cake. But to be fair, it was gluten-free carrot cake. So it's about as healthy as you can get for being cake. But I wanted to tell you that. I thought you'd be happy to hear it. And then you were also there actually during a really rough time where David Torrance, who is a pro runner and a friend of the team, that he actually kind of passed away mysteriously, sort of. I don't know if we've ever really gotten full answers on that, but what was that like to be around the team when they were sort of going through that period of grief?
Yeah, that was, that was a gut punch. Obviously much more so for those on the team who were close to him, Matt being one of those people, Stephanie Bruce being another. But for me, I had met David, and I had been a fan of his, actually. Like, he was one of my favorite pros. I loved his exuberance. He just had like a puppy dog way of being a professional runner that was like, and he was a late bloomer too, which is, I love late bloomers. They give me hope. So, when I met him, I was like, all fanboy.
Where did you meet him? It was actually at a run. Was it at one of the bagel runs up in town?
I met him initially at a bagel run, and then again the same day. And we didn't meet properly. We were just running together in a small group. But then we met properly a couple hours later at a team strength workout. And we actually had a little chat at that time. And it was like one of those moments like when, like you meet someone you look up to, and it's actually not just, you might remember that for the rest of your life just because you're meeting someone you look up to, but it was actually a moment, you know what I mean? Like the actual substance of it is something I was going to take with me. And then, when he died, so it actually, it was a gut punch for me too. It just got, it does this for everyone, right? When he was 31 for crying out loud. So it just got me thinking about just a lot of stuff. Part of the reason I was there, I was so motivated to do this thing was a feeling of unfinished business. Like so many athletes can relate to that. Like so many of us, even when you kind of make it to the top, you might, retire saying, I never was quite as good as I thought I could be, but I had a lot of that. And, when that is coupled with, being one step removed from someone passing on before their time, it adds a little bit of depth to those types of reflections. It's like, I really don't want any unfinished business. I felt like David lived in a way where it was way too soon, but he lived really well.
Yeah.
For those 31 years. So, I doubt he left with a ton of regrets.
Yeah. I have to agree with that. I think also it almost reminded me of the book Running with the Buffaloes, where, kind of the same thing. Someone goes to follow this team for a season and one of the team members passes away. And it's odd because reading through it, even though I lived through it, it read almost more like a novel in that way of it's just this really odd plot twist that you don't expect. And I think there is a lot of the book does read that way, unlike some of the other books I've read of yours, which are pretty straightforward and informational. But not to say that this one isn't either, because there's plenty of stuff that people can learn from. And especially one thing that's kind of fascinating to me, because you and I came up to Flagstaff around the same time, and you adjusted to altitude so fast in a way I can't even comprehend, because I didn't race well for the first year and a half that I lived up here. And yet you obviously were up here for a couple months, went down and set a PR. So what did you do? What were the precautions you took moving up to 7,000 feet? And then within those first couple of weeks, what did you do to sort of prepare yourself for that new added stimulus to your training? Yeah,
there were three big things that I think worked in my favor. One was that I had good preparatory training. So this was 2017 was a jam-packed year for me. It'll stand as the best running year of my life. So in the spring, in connection with another book I was working on, my wife and I spent 8 weeks traveling all over the country, and I ran a marathon in a different location each weekend throughout those 8 weeks. And, plenty of people have taken on much bigger challenges than that, but that was a huge challenge for me, an injury-prone runner. I wasn't doing it to break any records, but it just gave me this, and I wasn't racing them, I was just doing them, but it left me with this tremendous base of fitness. And so that ended in early May. And then Ben Rosario sort of took the reins of my training after that. So I had roughly, I think, 7 weeks back home to transition from that huge aerobic base to just being sort of like a well-rounded runner ready to do pro style, 12 weeks of pro style marathon training. So I just, if he said jump, I said how high.
Thank you to Tracksmith for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast. Tracksmith is a Boston-based brand led by a group of runners who are committed to making classically stylish, cutting-edge apparel. You've been hearing me talk about these products, and they have one simple goal: to craft the most considered products on the market for runners dedicated to the personal pursuit of excellence. Now, I have been so inspired over the previous month seeing you guys out there finding your own version of excellence, chasing goals that you don't even know when you're going to race, getting yourself out there, pushing yourself and doing these runs that you don't have to do. No one is making you do it. There isn't a goal race on the agenda. Well, we don't know for sure that there are any goal races on the agenda to kind of keep you motivated. The motivation right now has to be from internal, and I have loved seeing it, and Tracksmith is so inspired by people who are out there doing that. That is you. Tracksmith designs all their products to solve the kind of problems that runners face, whether that's a breathable long sleeve shirt that can be reworn without washing, or the perfect short to go for your long run with room for your keys, phone, and fuel. Tracksmith sweats the details so you don't have to. Now, my friends, right now, if you are a first-time Tracksmith customer, you can get 15% off your order by going to tracksmith.com/Tina Muir. That's tracksmith.com/TINAMUIR to get 15% off your first order. Or you can switch it and go to tinamuir.com/Tracksmith, and I will show you my favorite items that I am really enjoying. And you can go straight from the links on my website directly to those items on the Tracksmith page. I've made it nice and easy for you with that. I'm really enjoying the Twilight tee right now. It is an ultra lightweight training tee that's built to be a workout staple. The hardworking pieces in Tracksmith's Twilight collection were inspired by those summer traditions of Twilight track meets, under the radar races that are perfect for testing fitness. Those might not be going on right now, but it's bringing back so many more warm memories for me thinking about those meets. So that has a personal meaning to me, these Twilight tees. They are made from Light as Air Bravio blend, which is a unique Italian micro mesh that is silky soft, moisture wicking, and incredibly cool against your skin. I absolutely love these products, especially all the items in the Twilight long sleeve. And friends, this is time to go make your best of that offer. Go to tracksmith.com/Tina Muir, enter code TINA to get 15% off your order.
Ben Rosario sort of took the reins of my training after that. So I had roughly, I think, 6 weeks, 7 weeks back home to transition from that huge aerobic base to just being sort of like a well-rounded runner ready to do pro style, 12 weeks of pro style marathon training. So I just, if he said jump, I said how high. And of course, Ben knows what he's doing as a coach. So he had me ready to go. He also had me start taking supplemental iron because, at 7,000 feet, your body's challenged to produce new red blood cells, especially if you're running a lot. But you can't do that unless you have an adequate iron supply. So it's funny, I must have been low because even before I left California, when I started taking the iron, I felt better instantly. Like my work got boost before I even left home.
Did you get checked? Like, did you have your blood work done at all in that time?
Not at home. Mm-hmm. But it just like, and even Wes Gregg with Hypo 2 Sport in Flagstaff, who he oversaw my blood work in Flagstaff, but he told me the biggest thing is how you feel. So even without numbers or blood draws, like, I just felt like Superman when I started taking the iron. So that prevented me from going into the hole. And then the third thing was Ben Rosario was, when I arrived in Flagstaff, really put the brakes on me in terms of my training. I was going stir crazy, because I was like no running on the first day, like a 4-mile easy run the second day, I think a 6-mile easy run the third day. I'd been running, 70, 75 miles a week up to that point. But that was precisely what scared me when I talked to Matt Yano and Jen Spielden on the first night, that, even if you feel good, if you just like jump right into normal training, that's a great way to get into a hole you'll never get out of. And I was spared from making that kind of stupid mistake by Ben.
Yeah, I think it's also, you can sort of, there are some athletes who can sort of fake it during runs, but then it catches up to you after. And I remember a run that you and I did. Oh my gosh, I'd maybe been up there for a week and a half or 2 weeks. And it was my first long run up there. It was like 20 or 21 miles. And you and I made the mistake of going out the first half with Kellen, who was running like 6:30 or 6:45 pace. And that day when I got back from that long run, I slept for 4.5 hours. And I wondered, I was like, is Matt as beat up as I am? But from what I understand from the book, I think you avoided napping as much as is humanly possible until several weeks into your training, it finally caught up with you and you realized you had to sleep during the day too, like normal professional runners.
Right. Yeah. The napping thing was, that was the whole conceit, right? Like I'm there to do everything the pros do. And I really did, but napping was the last domino to fall because unlike the real pros, like, who were getting paid to do what they were doing, I was not. So I still had to fit in like gainful, not employment because I didn't have a job, but like, I still like do the coaching I do and the writing I do. And that time had to come from somewhere. And so I just felt like, I can't possibly nap. But yeah, like you said, I got to a point where like, I didn't even have a choice in the matter. Like I was going down at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Like I was going down no matter where I was.
Oh man, I know that feeling so well. And I think altitude does have a lot to do with that. And it's funny because this is actually not the first time you've spent time with a professional team. This is something I've been actually dying to ask you about because in the book, How Bad Do You Want It?, which as I mentioned is my all-time favorite of yours, you actually spent some time up in the mountains of North Carolina with the Zap fitness team. And I'm so curious, having run for Zap and also having spent some time with NAZ, I want to know what parallels you see between those two teams. How are they different and how are they similar?
Yeah, they're different. You could probably speak to this better than I could, but like, to me, they're quite different. The Zap Fitness now, Zap Endurance crew, like they're out, it's pretty remote where they are. And it's kind of a hand to mouth way of living. And there's a reason Galen Rupp isn't there, right?
White collar and blue collar. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So it takes a special type of person to, I guess, not only deal with that, but like thrive in that type of environment. And Pete Ray, the coach of the team, and Zika, his wife, who manages it with him, like they're very careful. Like you passed muster somehow, but like they know like it can go badly.
Yeah.
So you end up with like, I mean, I loved it. I didn't spend nearly as much time there, but you end up with a pretty interesting cast of characters. If you're just like a bunch of young, passionate runners who are okay with living in the woods and serving meals occasionally to adult, summer run campers like that. Some humility, that not every pro runner has.
They're the ones unclogging the toilets in the lodge after camp. They're the ones on the tractor mowing the yard. Yeah, for sure. No, and I think you're right. It really does boil down to, and Pete has been very honest about that. He said, this lifestyle works for maybe 1 out of every 3 runners that we bring in, even after their careful selective process. It's not for everyone. But what of the two dynamics, which do you prefer, honestly? Do you find yourself more in that camp of like, okay, I could unplug toilets and drive a tractor if it means my life is just about running at the end of a dirt road in the woods for years?
Yeah, I mean, that's a difficult choice. But I mean, I will say, I think I could have done the Zap thing for not a long time, but like a full year anyway. Absolutely. Especially like fresh out of college, Yeah. I totally could have gotten down with that, because it is just like, it's like, a Magic Mountain type of scenario where it's almost like you're leaving reality and you're pursuing the dream beyond the looking glass. But it's just, it's beautiful. I just had some moments I won't forget just as a kind of a visitor there.
Yeah. I can't help but wonder if you had decided rather than NAZ, okay, I'm going to go back to Zap and I'm going to chase the Chicago Marathon under Pete's coaching to see what I can do. I can't help but wonder, like, how fast would you have run if you'd done it that way? You'll never really know. But I mean, I think there's one thing to how your body responds and in different places. And really up here, you even the weeks that you were here or the months that you were here, you dealt with injuries, like some stuff popped up. So tell us about like how your body sort of responded to the training between the time you moved up in Chicago.
Yeah. So I met Ben face to face for the first time at the California International Marathon in Sacramento. So this would have been December before the July I actually went out there. And it was just like an initial meeting. And Josh Cox, the agent for the team, he was there too. And I remember telling Ben at that time, like, I will get injured during my time with you. Like, I'm not a pessimist. I'm just telling you, I've been running for 30 plus years now. And like, I've never done what I'm about to do with your group. And I've never been as old as I am now. It's like, I just prepare for it. And sure enough, I mean, I got one major injury and then, I was constantly on the verge of falling apart. But on the other side, I mean, my body responded just amazingly to the training. Like, I mean, people were telling me after just a short time there, like, you don't even look the same. Yeah. It's true. Like all these veins, I never knew. My veins had veins. I'm serious. Like, I lost 9 pounds.
Which is already, it's like you turn sideways and you disappear. Like you're a skinny guy. Yeah, so, man. Yeah,
I was a skinny dude to start with. And I just also felt different. Yeah, I remember telling James McCurdy, the running coach who you obviously know well, coaching with his operation. He spent some time as a guest. He and his then girlfriend, Heather Zuba, now his wife, Heather McCurdy. And so I got to know him really well. And I remember telling him at one point, I feel like I'm aging in reverse. Like I really did. I just felt just like light and kind of like tight and bouncy. Like I could dunk a basketball. It's like someone give me a ball. I
would love to have seen you try. That would have been amazing.
I think I could have dunked anything I could palm. I could, when I was 18.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I guess you're not a short guy either. You're like 6'1". Is that right?
Yeah. So tennis ball at least.
Oh man. Yeah, I remember. And a couple things popped up. You had to get treatment, both at Hypo 2 and then down in Phoenix with one of the best physical therapists in the country. But somehow or other, you made it to the race. And Chicago, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Like, there are certain amenities that elites get, and you actually were able to run the race as an elite. And, you know, you get picked up in the airport by a limo, and you have this big hospitality suite in the penthouse of one of the nicest hotels in Chicago. And I think, honestly, that's one of the parts that recreational runners are really going to love reading about. But I've never run Chicago as part of the mass field. And I'm wondering, for you, what were some of the main differences on race morning? Like, what struck you that's different between running in the elite field and running as part of the masses?
Put it this way, it's hard to go back to the masses after an experience like that. Yeah, I mean, because, you know, we had our own buses to the start. So, I mean, you're sort of taken care of. I mean, all you have to do is show up at the right place, and then, you know, people just say, go that way. And so there was, you know, like a VIP warm-up area, like a tent with, like, it seemed like 3 porta potties for every athlete. Mm-hmm. And, you know, just like it's a, you know, like a nice, comfortable space to hang out. And like there was a, you know, an outdoor warm up area. Mm-hmm. So the tent was enclosed, and there was an outdoor warm up area. So, you know, like in an event that size, if you're in the masses, like you might not even be able to warm up. Like, or if you do, you have to do it so early. It just, it all undoes itself while you're waiting in the corrals. Yeah. So like, you know, you don't have to worry about like gear check. Like, you know, I had this backpack that had been given to me when I registered. I just put whatever I needed in it and just left it in the tent. You know, it had my number on it. It was going to be waiting for me. I didn't have to worry about it. And the moment that really just encapsulated it for me is like after we were taken out to the start line, and you have to picture this. It's like there were 48 people, men and women combined, in the elite field. I was one of those 48. There were 40,000 other people. So, I mean, like for someone like me, it's just like, it is the definition of a surreal experience, you know?
Especially at Chicago, where it's like that is one of my favorite starting lines in the whole world, because you're out there getting ready and the sun is just coming up and it's hitting these huge skyscrapers in front of you. There's helicopters in the air. And it is on a slight incline. So if you do a little stride out, you turn around and you see those 40,000 people. I have to imagine that at that moment, your heart was just bum, 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 you know? Was it weird, like starting the race in that field? What did that feel like?
Yeah. You know, I was pretty calm. You know, Ben did a good job of preparing me for it. And, you know, if he hadn't, it might have been a little too much. The other thing I sort of had working in my favor was that through my work as a journalist, like I've been around a lot of those scenes. You know, I was never wearing a number on my belly. But, you know, I was next to household name runners, like, in that elite field, but, you know, I interview them for a living. So that took a little bit of the edge off of it too. I mean, so it was surreal, but like, I wasn't like about to pop out of my skin. And part of that again was like Ben having said, don't do that. Like, don't let that happen. Like, you know, just helping me like picture what it was going to be like, what it was going to feel like, so that I didn't just like, you know, kind of shoot my wad before the gun even started.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And especially when it's like you do have, obviously you have a marathon to run in front of you. And I think something I probably should have mentioned earlier was that you had this really big, bold, audacious goal of breaking 240, which you had never done it. And your fastest time had been 8 years earlier?
9, yeah.
9 years. Yeah. So it had been almost a decade since you'd run your previous PR, and you were trying to do this crazy thing. So, and I know even during your time up at Flagstaff, you had a little bit of trouble sort of committing to that goal. So talk us through the race, and at what point did you feel like, okay, this might actually be a possibility that I'm going to do it?
Yeah, like quite honestly, and this is just part of what just made this experience qualitatively different from any other experience I've had, is like, I knew I was going to do it before I even left Flagstaff. Like, I didn't believe it. I knew it.
How?
I just can't say, but I just, you know, because I had been, you know, that fit before. You know, we did in the final weeks, we did a couple workouts at lower elevations, because I didn't really quite, I mean, I knew I was getting super fit. I didn't know exactly how fit, because I was doing everything at 7,000 feet. those workouts at lower elevations, I did really well, but I wasn't quite matching my numbers from like my early mid 30s, So I'm not sure exactly what it was. Other than that, I just felt awesome. Like I just felt I had never been that fit, and just felt I wasn't tired. I wasn't beat up. I just knew I was going to do it.
Yeah.
So, anything could happen. And I remember joking about this with people. It's like, well, I could twist my ankle on a curb. But I knew, I honestly felt like, unless I just completely blow it, like just self-sabotage, or just like, a meteor falls out of the sky and crushes me at mile 16, like I knew I could do it. But it actually didn't turn out being that easy, because during the race, I had the groin or the hip abductor tendon that I had injured rather severely, actually, about halfway through the training. It reared its ugly head, and it just kind of put a governor on me from eight miles on, and definitely gave me a lot of anxiety, because it had been a showstopper in the workout when it first happened. And I knew it could take me down. It could just go spring and my day would be over. So it wasn't easy, but like I said, I knew I could do it.
Yeah. Was that moment, because you ran 2:39, that moment of crossing the finish line, what was that like? Was that the happiest finish line of your life? I'm sure people have asked you that, but was it?
As I describe it in the book, I felt exactly one emotion after I crossed the finish line, and it was relief.
Yeah, because honestly, like, Matt, okay, let's just say hypothetically, what if it hadn't gone well? What if you'd run 2:45 or 2:50, or God forbid, had to drop out? This whole book was, the point was to sort of prove that an average guy going up to train like a pro, that it works. So what would have happened? How would the book be different now if for some reason the goal hadn't panned out? Would it have been more about the journey than the destination, do you think?
Yeah, that's what made this whole thing kind of a high wire act. And, Paper Lion was for George Plimpton too. When he was doing his whole thing with the Detroit Lions, I mentioned his climax was supposed to be scrimmaging against another team. He never got put in that game. Like
man.
Like at the last minute, like the coach, I guess like maybe the commissioner of the league or something or the GM of the team or whatever had gotten in the coach's ear. The coach was going to do it, and then he had no climax. And he still made the book work. I mean, shoot, they made it the book sold 1 million copies. They made a movie out of it, starring George Plimpton himself.
Oh, wow.
But so I took some comfort in that. Like, if it all goes sideways, well, I could.
That would be the equivalent of like Ben Rosario being like, you know what, you're going to embarrass the uniform. You're not running. I just can't imagine that happening.
Or I mean, honestly, like like Josh Cox, we haven't mentioned this. Josh Cox, the agent for the team, had to pull strings with Kerry Pinkowski, the race director of the Chicago Marathon, to get me an elite bib. I mean, the standard for men to get one of those bibs is a sub 2:14 marathon recent, or the equivalent performance at another distance. Well, I mean, my PR was 2:41 and that time was 9 years old. So like, who knows, that it could have happened. They could have said, oh, this was a mistake, a clerical error. Like, you can't run. Or, any of a number of, I mean, like you said, I could have just run 2:45. I mean, actually 2:45 would have worked because, well, sort of, not as well, but in point of fact, it was a high wire act. But that was part of it, because I wanted to risk a lot, because that's what the pros do. Yeah. I mean, think about the stakes for the real pros. It's your livelihood, and shoot, it's like any other professional sport. It's what have you done for, like you don't perform, like you don't keep your shoe contract. It's as simple as that. And so I wanted to taste a little bit. I mean, it doesn't really compare, but I wanted to taste those stakes a little bit. That was kind of part of the experience for me.
Yeah. 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 No, I think it is, you were able to capture that experience that professional runners go through, but there's also, you came at it from an angle that most professional runners in my situation haven't gone through yet, which is you had already faced those years of thinking your best was behind you, which is something I think most professional runners are terrified of. You always have to believe that the best is yet to come. Otherwise, why do it? And you mentioned that sort of midlife crisis that you had, but I want to know now, a year and a half removed from that. Has it been a year and a half? Is that right? Yeah, it's been a year.
Oh, shoot.
Has it been 2.5 years? Since the race?
This was 2017, Sarah.
Gosh. Wow, it feels like, oh man, time is moving too fast. 2.5 years since that. Right now, like, do you have more peace knowing that 239 is behind you? Do you have more peace, or is there still some sort of hunger to say, can I go run 235 if I do it again?
I absolutely have more peace. I really do. When I first got back to California, I did exactly what I said I wasn't going to do, and I tried to keep the momentum going.
Of course you did.
Because, I was slowed down a little bit. I mean, you told me while I was in Flagstaff, dude, you're not in 239 shape. You're in 235 shape. Yeah. And
well, you know why, Matt? Because like I had run 232 at that point, and I was having trouble hanging with you on a workout that we did together. So I was like, he's a lot fitter than he thinks. Although, honestly, I think I was struggling with altitude more than I thought. So probably somewhere in the middle, but that's okay.
I think I was somewhere in the middle because it was warm that day in Chicago. And I was definitely slowed down by the groin. So, I got back home thinking, you know what? Maybe I've got one more shot. I knew I couldn't recreate, the experience I'd had in Flagstaff. But I thought, well, maybe I can still run one faster marathon. But, sure enough, I got injured again and whatever. But it didn't, it wasn't as painful. I ended up withdrawing from, the next marathon I signed up for. But it was like, oh, well, easy come, easy go, because I had finished I'd gotten the monkey off my back. Yeah. And I don't have to do it again. So I've still been getting after it really athletically since then, just because I'm still hungry. Yeah. At some point, maybe my mindset will change, but I love to test my limits. And so I do. Yeah. But now I don't. The motivation has changed a little bit. Now I'm just testing my limits for its own sake, like not to prove to myself that I can do something that for a long time I believed in my heart that I could do.
Friends, you've probably heard me saying over the past few months that I am currently taking 3 months off from working while I enjoy time with my new baby. Now, please make sure I stick to this. If you see me doing things work online, that is time for you to get in touch with me, say, hey, what are you doing online? Now, I will let you know my assistant, Amber, is going to be taking over some things for me. Some things I have prepared ahead of time. But if you notice that it seems to be very real time, please let me know, because I promised myself I would take 3 months off and I need to be able to stick to that. Now, that being said, there is one thing that I'm continuing to do during this time. Not these podcasts. These podcasts were recorded ahead of time. You've got these interviews to enjoy. There will not be a break in episodes during this time. And I'm really thankful for guest host Sarah Crouch for taking over some of those. But the one thing that I am going to be doing during this time is writing my email newsletters on a Monday. Now, there's over 7,000 of you already signed up for these emails. I know you love them. I love seeing your replies come in every week. And you can sign up at tinamuir.com/subscriber. That's tinamuir.com/subscriber. All it is kind of an update, something I'm thinking about for the week, something that I'm appreciating. And it really makes you think. I love that I have the ability to get into people's heads and really make a difference. And then at the bottom, I give some things I'm enjoying, some updates, just some things that you may have missed throughout the week that I would have shared. And it's just something that's very kind of friend to friend. It just feels like I'm emailing you just to kind of let you know my updates. And I would love for you to be a part of the 7,000 other runners who are on this list. You can go to tinamuir.com/subscriber. That's tinamuir.com/subscriber to sign up. And I will see you every Monday.
But now I don't, the motivation has changed a little bit. Now I'm just testing my limits for its own sake, like not to prove to myself that I can do something that for a long time I've believed in my heart that I could do.
Yeah. And there's got to be some peace in knowing. I kind of view running as sort of, as I'm sure most runners do, as you have like these brackets to hit. And in the marathon, they seem to go every 10 minutes. So in the 230s, which is what you've run, and to know, okay, that's probably a bracket I wouldn't have made it out of into the 220s. And so there is something really, really satisfying about that for sure. But running is like, it's a very multifaceted sport. And you've written books about, oh my gosh, several different aspects of the sport: nutrition, mental toughness, training philosophy. And now with this book, training as a professional on that side of the sport. And I selfishly want you to have enjoyed writing this book more than any of the others. But can you tell me, like, of all the books you've written, which one did you enjoy writing in the process of the most? Was it this one or was it a different one?
This one actually was not all that enjoyable. It was enjoyable at the beginning and at the end. I kept a journal. I was blogging, but also keeping a journal throughout the experience, just to get the raw information down. And that was enjoyable because it didn't have to be good. I just had to get the information down. And, with the blog, it allowed me to sort of share what I was doing in real time with mostly other middle-aged runners who would have killed to be doing what I was doing. But then when I got home and it was time to get serious about turning this stuff into a book, it was actually a lot more difficult than I thought. And I couldn't figure out why, because I knew I had a great story to tell, and it was just a story. You know what I mean? All I had to do was tell it. But for whatever reason, it was a slog, just a real challenge. The first time I pitched the book to publishers, I got 0 offers. I struck out, and I had to sort of regroup, just find ways to make it better. And then, finally, I got some real momentum going, and I got to a point where I would actually, finish another draft and then go back and start reading from the beginning and think, you know what, this is actually getting kind of good. But it was tough. Boy, the one I most enjoyed, that's not even a thing. You don't enjoy writing. Which
one tortured you the least? I should ask.
That's more like it. Oh, goodness. I want to say it might have been Diet Cults. The one book I've ever written that actually wasn't really for athletes. Yeah. It's like a sociological look at why people can't think rationally about food.
It's very Malcolm Gladwell. That's what it is to me. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But that one, to the best of my recollection, it was just because it was a little bit of a random left turn for me. Maybe it's because I have an inner Malcolm Gladwell who hasn't been nurtured enough up to this point, but I remember having fun doing that one. Like, the research was a blast, and yeah, it's also I have a sense of humor. I think you know this because you know me. I don't actually get to use it a lot in my writing. It is there are funny moments in Running the Dream.
Very much so. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think you're so self-deprecating. It's unbelievable. And I agree. You do have that inner Malcolm Gladwell, but I also think you have that inner John L. Parker Jr. in you. And I'd like to see you put out the next great running novel, like Once a Runner, like something like that. I think that would be, after reading this book, which, like I said, I think it read more like a novel than any of your others. I'd love to see what you could do with something that's fictional and there's no rules. I don't know if I could ever talk you into doing that, but I'd really love to see it. No, let me be the judge of that. Write it and I'll let you know. All right. I'm going to ask you one more question about your time in Flagstaff. And this is going to be a little controversial, but I'm a guest host and I can't get fired. So who was your favorite member of NAZ?
Well, you know what? I can answer it. It's Matt.
Matt Yano?
Yeah. Yeah. Just because, I got to know him the best by far. Mm-hmm. And he's just a great guy, and he was so good to me. Like, he was, it's not to say that I might, if I had that much time, if I got to live with each member of the team for 13 weeks, I might have a different favorite.
Right.
So it's not even really a fair competition, but I mean, he was so giving, not just to me, but, to my wife, Nataki, as well. And, he let our dog into his home. And so, yeah, I mean, I owe a debt of gratitude to Matt that I'll never be able to repay.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And Matt he's one of the first people that when I moved up to Flagstaff, he was so welcoming. He's like, whatever you need, let me know. That's just who he is. He's just a very genuine guy. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you who your least favorite is. For some reason, I thought you'd say Scott Fauble, just because he's a very, he's like you. He's very quippy and he's funny and he's quick, but he's also incredibly intimidating as a runner. For some reason, I thought that would be your pick. That was my guess, but I was way off. All right. Yeah. So I'm going to round out with some absolutely ridiculous questions that have nothing to do with running. But okay, that's a lie. The first one has to do with running, and I customized this one for you. Are you ready?
No.
Okay, here we go. Would you rather run 2:18 and qualify for the Olympic trials or win a Pulitzer for your next book?
Win a Pulitzer, yeah.
Really? You could go run 2:18 right now. Are you serious? This is your running dream. It's like the biggest.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, 2:18 is it's good,
Okay,
but it's not.
How fast would it have to be to?
It's not 2:05.
How fast would I have had to make that for you to level out to the same level as a Pulitzer?
But I mean, I know you write as well. So, but I mean, as a lifelong writer, like when you ask me that question, I think, well, if I won a Pulitzer,
yeah.
That must be a really good book, and that's the thing. Like, I want to know what book I wrote to get that prize.
No, I got you. All right, next one, not so serious. Would you rather eat a handful of poison ivy or a handful of wasps? Because listen, the poison ivy is going to itch for like a month, but the wasps are going to hurt like hell, but only for like 2 minutes.
As an endurance athlete, I should probably say poison ivy, but I'm going to go wasps.
Do you know how bad that would hurt? Oh man, that's like when you get to two hills and one's, longer and more gradual, will take you more time, but you're just going to take that steep hill right to the top. That's who you are. Okay, this one, I just want to apologize in advance. This is so bad. Would you rather make out with a goat, but no one ever found out about it, or not make out with a goat, but everybody thinks that you did?
I'll say, I kind of want to compare my answer against like what do normal people say? I'll say make out with a goat.
Same. I would have gone the same way. I just have too much pride.
Maybe like we're the only two people on Earth who would have given that answer, or maybe we're normal. I don't know.
I think we're normal. I just think most people would have lied about it. All right. Last question. You have a wall in your house that you have to paint, but you can paint it with only your knees or only your face. What do you do?
Face.
You're just going to face paint the entire wall. Matt, I appreciate your answers. All right. Running the Dream. You can find it on Amazon. It will already be out by the time that this podcast airs. Matt, thank you so much. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your time today.
Yes, this was a lot of fun. Thanks, Sarah.
My friends, if you have a minute and you could leave a review on your favorite podcast player, Apple Podcasts, aka iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Spotify, or whatever else podcast player you use to listen to this podcast, or if you would subscribe to this podcast, you will help me get out in front of new runners to make our tribe even bigger and even better. It might not seem like you as one person can make a difference, but really it helps a lot. And it shows me you appreciate the hard work I put in for those. Thank you so much. I totally see what you are saying now when you tell me that you really enjoy the conversational episodes, the episodes where it's just kind of like a laugh between two friends. I definitely enjoyed that episode between Matt and Sarah, and she did fantastic job interviewing him and has done with all the other episodes that she has been recording. You have one episode left that she has recorded, and I'll let you look forward to that one. Now I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors again. That's UCAN and Tracksmith for sponsoring this episode. You can get 15% off your order for a return customer from UCAN, or you can get 25% off your order for a first-time visitor to UCAN by going to the show notes. You can also get 15% off your first order at Tracksmith. So be sure you go to the show notes at tinamuir.com/episode 194 to go make the most of those offers. Now, next week, we will be hearing from Professor Maya, who is... She is a runner. She does run, but she's not kind of typically known for being a runner. She is here to talk to us about confidence and about stopping apologizing, especially those women out there listening. This episode is one you need to hear. I heard Professor Maya on a totally non-running podcast, but it spoke to me so much, and I just felt that I had to pass this message along to my audience. I reached out to her. She was kind enough to say yes. We had an amazing conversation, and I cannot wait to hear what you think and to see how eye-opening it is for you, because when I heard her talk on this podcast that I'd heard before, I was blown away by the things that I had been doing, and I'm very, very aware of what I'm doing now, and I think you will be too. So be sure to subscribe if you have not already, and we can have that episode come right to you rather than going to search out and find it next Friday when it comes out. Now, my friends, be kind to yourself, be kind to this home that we live in, and have a wonderful week.
Thanks for listening to the Running for Real podcast. Be sure to check out tinamuir.com for show notes and even more helpful running information.